Hey, this is Jeff Sanders, and you're listening to the Creating a Successful Business podcast with Raf Calderon.
Hi there. Welcome to episode number 2 of CaSB. I'm your host, Raf Calderon. This is the podcast where you'll be encouraged to start your own business or make your existing business more successful. I want to share with you my journey as I create my online business from scratch. Each week, I'll feature interviews with entrepreneurs and influencers. We'll provide inspiration and resources with the ultimate goal to help you create your own successful business. Today, we have a very special show because we're featuring our first interview. We had our first guest on the show, and his name is Jeff Sanders, host of the 5 a.m. Miracle podcast. We'll be discussing how his business got started and the book he recently launched. Right now, we're in the middle of the 2015 holiday season. So let me just say to you, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I hope your holidays are full of joy and happiness, and I wish you peace and prosperity for 2016. The tip of the day comes by way of Nathan Chan, who started Founder Magazine. In an interview he did for SPI, he said, "If you are not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. The truth is, perfection is something you strive toward, not something you'll achieve. If you're waiting for your product or service to be perfect before you launch, it's never going to happen. Instead, you need to take incremental steps. Start with a minimal viable version of your product or with a limited set of features to your service. An example of this is the interview you're about to hear. I have way too many ums and other expressions. However, I couldn't put off holding the interview for another time. I'm never going to become an expert public speaker if I don't start speaking in public. All in all, I think it turned out well. I hope you'll agree. So, without further ado, here's the interview with Jeff Sanders. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Raf. Awesome to be here today.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you. Let me just go right into it. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Jeff Sanders. I have a podcast called the 5 a.m. Miracle. I have a book I just published with the same title. And essentially what I do is I help people be more productive. And I find ways for them to wake up early and dominate their day before breakfast. That's my tagline for my book and podcast. So essentially, I'm a coach, I'm a speaker. I kind of do whatever I can to spread the message of wake up and be intentional with your time, and then allow that intentionality to flow through to higher energy and more productivity, and really making the most of your time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let me just tell you right off the bat and tell our listeners that that's how I found you, through the podcast. I was telling you a few minutes earlier how your podcast is just awesome because that's exactly what I looked for. I was in my commute to work and I said, I'm having a hard time getting up. I wonder if anybody talks about that. And boom, there was a 5 a.m. Miracle. So it's very effective. What do you consider yourself foremost? A writer, a podcaster, or a speaker? I mean, you mentioned all those.
It's a good question, and it changes all the time. I think that up until this point, I've used podcaster as kind of the number one thing. And now that the book has come out, I'm using author more. And then from the book, I'll be doing more public speaking. So I've recently changed it to speaker as the first thing I list. So as far as what I'm actually doing primarily, I think the majority of my time is spent coaching and podcasting, although that's going to be shifting as I do more writing and speaking. So I think it kind of just depends on what the main focus is at the time.
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry. I didn't even mention coaching. I didn't see that listed on your website.
Yeah, that also has been kind of a work in progress as far as how I promote what I do. So, but yeah, you're right. That's part of the mix.
Yeah, I mean, let me go out of my list of questions a little bit there. How is that going?
Well, coaching essentially is kind of like what we're doing here. It's a video chat that I do with people, from all over the world. And I'll help them with those same exact issues of productivity and daily habits. And a lot of it has to do with taking someone's life who's very there's a lot going on, a lot of messiness, a lot of projects, and I help them find ways to streamline their process and really get more done and be more effective with their time. And so the coaching process is very similar to this call in the sense that we just kind of have a chat, we go through a big questionnaire, and I kind of break down their life and we find out ways to make them more efficient.
So back to the podcast, so I mentioned that I listen to you, I love the podcast. But one more thing I want to share with the audience, which is one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have you, is that you are one of my main inspirations to start this podcast. Believe it or not, I had listened to other podcasts before, but not very like intentionally, just kind of like for entertainment. And then when I found you, it's like, wow, this is like awesome. And the way, like all the stuff you talk about, habits and everything was like so true. And I was looking for that. And I loved how while you were interviewing your guests, you find out like the habits that help them get to the point where they are. So can you share us what you've been able to accomplish through your podcast?
Well, essentially, the podcast is kind of the meat of my business. It's the core of what I do in a lot of ways. It's the best marketing arm of what I do. So people find me the most through the podcast. I think it really highlights kind of my best skills in terms of public speaking. There's a lot of great ways to connect with an audience there. My podcast led to my book deal that I got to allow me to publish a book. So it's the podcast has led to a lot of success kind of in the business I've tried to develop. So I'm very happy with the podcast. I think it's kind of like the core of what I want to promote and make available. So I'm a huge fan of it.
I mean, that's what we hear. So do you often have people come up to you and like say kind of like what I'm saying, hey, listen to you. I'm like getting up early so much more than before. Does that happen to you a lot?
In person, not quite as much. I think I'm more known kind of in a niche space in the world of productivity and people online. But I do get emails every day from people who, have found the show and they're excited about it, and people who kind of join the 5 a.m. club and they wake up early and they're excited to change their life. So in that sense, yeah, I do hear from people all the time who are, discovering that idea that you could wake up early, and they're very excited to begin that process.
All right. What time do you get up today, by the way?
Today was 6 a.m. actually. It varies from day to day. But in terms of my holiday schedule, I've had a little more parties than usual.
Yeah,
led to later nights, and so it kind of varies.
And to be fair, not to spoil the book, but you did mention in the book that people can create their own 5 a.m. right?
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the scariest parts about my title is that it sounds like you have to be up at 5 a.m. to benefit from what I talk about, which is not true. Intentionality is the core of what I discuss. And so if you are intentionally get up at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock and you schedule your time, well, then you're going to be able to maximize the time you do have. And so, I chose 5 a.m. for a reason, which was at the time I set that, it made the most sense with my day job to wake up at 5, train for my marathon, and then get to work on time. But now that I work for myself and work from home, the time I wake up actually just varies day to day based on that schedule for that day, what makes the most sense in terms of getting the best amount of sleep that I can and how that follows through with my schedule for that day.
So you've had a lot of success with the podcast. You mentioned that's one of the things that you're most known for. I saw on your site that it was nominated for an award this year, Best Produced category. You surpassed 1 million downloads. That sounds like a lot.
Recently, it's 2 million downloads.
What, 2 million?
Yeah.
Oh, you got to update that, man.
Yeah, I'll make sure to get those numbers up there. But yeah, it's just hit 2 million about a month ago.
What was like the average number of downloads for? I mean, like what in a podcasting world? Like I'm so new to this. What distinguishes just like an average podcast versus 2 million sounds like a lot. But even if you had said to me 200,000, I would have thought that would be a lot also.
It varies. The podcasting world is really, it's still new in a lot of ways. And so there's a lot of podcasts that have kind of grown over the last few years to like the NPRs of the world that have millions of downloads per episode. They literally will have 20 million downloads a month. Whereas I average around 100,000 downloads per month. But that's only after podcasting for 2.5 years and working really intentionally to grow my audience. So new podcasters, like your first month, I think I had maybe 500 downloads my first month, whereas now I average 2,000, 3,000 a day. So it literally can grow over time. It depends on the niche you're targeting and how much energy you put into the podcast and who you market it to, and there's a lot of factors involved. But I think most podcasters probably see somewhere in the ballpark of 1,000 downloads per episode once they've got going and been podcasting for a while.
Okay. And the other accomplishment you had this year is that you surpassed 1,000 members. Is that figure bigger now in your Miracle community group?
It is. We're almost at 2,000 now. So it's like 1,950, I think, today. So yeah, that community has definitely grown over time, and that's one of the best places for people to connect with other listeners of the podcast and other people who want to, learn from others who are going through the same process of waking up early and using the same strategies I discussed in the show.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, congratulations on those successes. What do you attribute the success to?
For the community?
Well, I guess both for the community and the podcast. Actually, good point. I was thinking for the podcast, but let's go to the community as well, whichever you want to answer first.
Well, I mean, the community success is based on the podcast. And so that's kind of like, I grew the podcast and I promoted the community there. So that's how that Facebook community grew itself. In terms of the podcast growth, what I've noticed doing in the online space, this is true with business in general, is that if you have something that, you're growing yourself, but your audience is small and you want to have a bigger audience, you have to get yourself mentioned on someone else's platform that's a lot larger than yours. It's kind of like the Oprah effect. Like if I were to be on, if Oprah still had her show going on today and I was on her show, I'd be exposed to millions of viewers and then my brand would grow from there. And that's essentially what you're trying to do as any entrepreneur is you're trying to get yourself noticed on brands bigger than yours to be exposed to all new audience members. And then your show will grow. Your brand will be, exposed to so many new people. So that's been the case, like whether it's through guest blogging, appearing on other podcasts as a guest yourself, launching big products or books or whatever. You're trying to do whatever you can to make a bigger name for yourself, but ultimately get mentioned on other bigger brands. And then that's where your audience will grow the most.
Yeah, I just recently read an interview from Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx.
Yeah.
And she talked about that her big moment was when she was featured in the Oprah show. And after that, her brand exploded. Was there one particular a podcast or interview that was conducted for you that, had you saw the dramatic increase in your audience?
There was one in the beginning. I launched my show in July of 2013, and in September, so about 2 months later, my podcast was listed on the Art of Manliness blog.
Yes.
It's a very popular website, and they listed the top, I think it was top 24 podcasts for men. And they listed mine as number 22. I was very bottom of the list. But that one mention on their popular website exploded my numbers overnight. So I was averaging maybe 200 downloads an episode, and then I was averaging 2,000 overnight. That was a huge jump. It didn't stay at that number. It dropped after that a little bit, but those kinds of inflection points happened over time. That wasn't just one example. It happened early on. I mean, there have been others throughout the last couple of years, but nothing as dramatic as that initial kind of bump I had.
I heard about the Art of Manliness. Maybe it was through your show. Let me ask you a few questions about your book. Tell the audience a little bit about it.
Sure. And the book is essentially my podcast in written form. I was pitched by a publisher to write a book about early mornings and productivity, which is what my podcast is all about. And so I essentially took the main concepts in my podcast and the main concepts from my coaching services and the experience that I've had those last few years, and I packaged that together into a book and outline a 7-step process for productivity. And that's the core of the book is what I call the 5 a.m. blueprint. And it is those 7 steps and how you can transform your life in a very structured process with lots of actionable steps. And it's a very much of a workbook style book. So it's not a passive read by any means.
No, it's not.
Very actionable. That's the intention. So but the 5 a.m. blueprint is the core of the book.
All right, cool. So the publisher approached you first? Okay.
Yeah, which is unusual. Most of the time you have to pitch a publisher to get a book deal, and I got lucky that somebody was looking for someone like me. When they found me, it was just a good fit. So that worked out well in my case.
Well, it seems to happen often that people are looking for you. They're looking for your content, and they find it. It's there. So, yeah, congrats. I mean, I would have thought that it was you were oh, I want to write a book. Let me find somebody. How long did it take you to write it?
The initial planning stages took me around a month to outline the book. But then once I had it outlined, I wrote the entire thing in about 3.5 weeks.
Wow, not long at all.
Yeah, for most authors, that's a really short time period. That only worked out so well. Number one, because I had the time to do it, but more importantly, these were concepts that I know really well. I've discussed these things for years on the show, so to just write down what I already had discussed before wasn't that difficult. It was just a matter of saying, well, here's the outline, just pop it in, 1, 2, 3, and write it down. So once I had the outline set, it was a very fast process to write the book.
Exactly. So it really, you could say, probably wasn't just 2 weeks. It was like more like 2-3 years because you've been talking about it for so long.
There's no way. If I started from scratch to write this book, it would have taken me maybe over a year. But because I'd already done all this research and all this effort, it was very easy to put it all together.
So you have also an ebook, right? Previously, and I think did it go by the same name?
That was the original 5 a.m. Miracle was an ebook. I actually had that was where the whole thing started. So I had my own personal kind of wake up early at 5 a.m. miracle experience, and I got excited about early mornings. And then I wrote an ebook and put it on my blog. And the ebook was really popular, and I realized this is what I could do a podcast about. And so then I launched the podcast and gave away that ebook for free for the last almost 2.5 years. And then recently I just took that down, and now it's been replaced by the actual physical book.
Okay, yeah, interesting, because that's one of the things I wanted to ask you, actually, because I'm starting kind of like reverse, I guess. So you started with an ebook or the blog first, right?
Yeah, so the blog had been around for over a year. And based on my readers and kind of the flow of the way things were going, I shifted gears from health and wellness into personal development and productivity as the majority of my content. And in that process, that's where the 5 a.m. Miracle kicked in. And so I wrote an ebook and then made that available to my blog readers. And based on that, I launched the podcast.
You had your wife as a guest. And I think you've had her a few times now, right?
She's been on 4 times, yeah.
4 times. But I think this was probably the first time she came on, and she talked about how she listens to a lot of podcasts as well. And she listens to them like at twice the speed.
She definitely loves to have podcasts just drilled at her at a fast pace, no doubt about it. I think her favorite shows are usually 2.5 to 3x speed because, like most people, she's got, a busy schedule. And in order to get all that content in there, she finds it more effective to listen to it at a fast speed, and she gets the information she needs. And she loves it.
That's intense. But my point is that prior to that time, I was listening to podcasts really like at the same speed. And I kind of like saw that little button there in my iTunes player, but I wasn't like using it. And then when I heard her say that, another light bulb went on. I'm like, now I get it. And since then, I do it. I don't listen to it twice at speed. I like 1.5 times.
I mean, I talk pretty fast on my show, so if you listen to it at 2x speed, you probably will miss a lot of what I say.
Yeah.
But it kind of depends on, what speed you prefer.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm like, is it defeating the purpose? Because that is true. Like, I would play like at 1.5 times the speed, and then I miss something. So then I had to like rewind it, slow it down, play it again. So I don't know, maybe if I listen to it at normal speed, I wouldn't have to do that as much. But this is the business show, right? Is creating a successful business. So I want to ask you some kind of like businessy related questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Do you have any employees? Do you have anybody helping you with your, do you see your what you do with podcasting, writing as a business? Do you think of it like that?
Yeah, I mean, I do work for myself, so this is definitely a business. The coaching is the majority of my income, along with podcast sponsorships, which I'm just now getting into. Doing more public speaking, book sales, products I have on my website. All those things added together, create my business. I don't have any employees at this point in time, so everything is definitely like all on me, 100%. I'm a solopreneur in that sense. I don't plan to keep it that way. As I'm able to hire, virtual assistants in the future, I'll probably be going that route for a while to help with some of the technical side of the website maintenance. But at this point, it's just me running what I do.
Yeah, it's your passion, right? So
definitely.
So you mentioned you're doing this full time, right?
Yes.
So since when? How long have you been full time?
A little over a year. I had a job at a career college, and I was doing this, in 19 weekends essentially while I was working there. And then that school I worked for went bankrupt and closed overnight. And when that happened, I had the option to, find another job or just take the business I had been developing and make it full time. And that was I chose to take the business full time at that point. And it was kind of a scary, bumpy couple of months to make the numbers work. But and it's still, I feel like in a lot of ways I'm still kind of in the bumpy stages. But things are definitely improving, and it's been quite a process.
Okay, so you're a solopreneur. You're doing everything. So I'm sure it's got to be hectic. It's got to be a lot. So how do you manage? How do you do the work-life balance?
Well, I mean, essentially, I work from home. So for me, personal stuff and business stuff, it's all kind of wrapped together. So I don't really have set work hours. I just work pretty much whenever I feel like it or whatever the next most important thing is to get done. I've recently added a little more structure into my day where I have cutoff times at night, and I don't work on the weekends unless I really have to. But for the most part, I have a very, I live in my business, and I'm always working on it in some form. But I love what I do, and so it's not like it pains me to work. Like, I like this stuff, so if I spend time on it, it's fun for me, and I enjoy the process. So as much work as it is, it forces me to be more productive and more efficient with my time. But I also really enjoy it.
I heard you just earlier during the summer say that you take a sabbatical.
Yes, I've taken a couple of sabbaticals in the last couple of years. Twice a year, so February and August, I've been doing some sabbaticals, essentially where I'm not producing any new content during those months. So there's no episodes of the podcast that I'm creating during that time, and no blog posts. With that, I mean, that alone to stop my content creation for 4 weeks frees up a lot of my time, because a good chunk of my time is spent producing episodes of the podcast. And so if I don't have that going on for a month, it frees up a lot of my time and mental space to be able to focus on bigger projects, to work for other products I want to launch or other big things I want to tackle. And I've really found that those are necessary times off. Like, if I don't intentionally stop myself from working, I will just get burned out eventually. And so I think it's really important to take time off, especially, schedule your business and life around the idea that you can do that. It may not be for a full month, and I'm still working during that time, but I'm letting go as much as I can to free up my mind and my body, so I can just kind of recalibrate and get back to business in a much better way.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, that's so important, and that's one of the things that I'm going to be, I plan to highlight to my listeners, that idea of, what Pat Flynn speaks of a lot on smart passive income, right? Working hard now so you can enjoy the benefits later, taking time for yourself, for family, all that stuff. So having that balance is so important,
Definitely.
Can I ask you, again, this is a business podcast, what you've been able to accomplish financially through your business? I mean, like, you have the podcast, the book, the coaching. I mean, obviously you're successful. You're able to do it full time. I don't know if you can give us some window of what that looks like.
Well, I mean, the numbers aren't fantastic. It's not like I'm not making six figures or anything like that yet. That's kind of the goal of where I'm headed. But I'm making enough to make it work. Right. I think that my perspective on my business has always been that I've always wanted to work for myself. I have, and not because I was born as an entrepreneur, it's because I was born as a guy who hated being an employee. And so as I worked in my 20s for other companies, there was nothing that I wanted more than to just quit and get out of there. I couldn't financially afford to do so for a long time, but then the opportunity popped up. It was a no-brainer that I wanted to make that happen. So I kind of live on a much tighter budget than the average person might want to, because I thrive in the freedom that I have every day. Yeah. And so I'd almost, and given the two options, I'd almost rather earn less and have the freedom than to earn more and have golden handcuffs at a company that I don't want to work for. And so that's the choice that I've made. Long term, I mean, businesses, come and go, and things, there's good seasons and bad seasons. So there's no telling that I'll stay an entrepreneur full time forever. But it's really just the thing that I've decided that this is what I want, and so I'm going to do whatever I can to make it work. And then hopefully over time that will scale up and be more successful financially. It kind of ebbs and flows, and it's really based on my own skill set and my ability to apply that to make more money. So it's a work in progress, and I can't say that I'm a wild success financially. But I am living a life that I really enjoy, and I think that that's one of the key parts of being an entrepreneur, is creating that kind of lifestyle. So in that sense, I feel like I've done well.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for the transparency, and I think that the passion shows in what you do, and like just starting this podcast myself. I hope to monetize it sometime in the future, but I'm just doing it for the joy of it, and just like the joy and the excitement out of it, it's what's motivating me and driving me forward. So I'm going to steal a page out of your book. I want to ask you a little bit more about, you hinted at habits, personal development. Like you're big on that, and I love that. So I want to just prod a little bit in that direction to like give the audience an idea of your own personal habits besides getting up early, right? Daily exercise. What can you tell us regarding like how you value exercise?
Well, my entire morning routine is based off of energy production, and the core of that for me really is a workout in the morning. Because for me, exercise is what leads to more energy, which leads to more productivity, and it's all kind of based on the idea that if I wake up and prioritize a workout, then I will be so much better off the rest of that day. And so whenever possible, I'll schedule an early morning workout. And this doesn't happen every single day in that time frame, but for me, the key to working out is just making sure I get it done. Even if it's short and simple, just having time to move my body and pump my blood, because that no doubt improves my energy, my enthusiasm, and my ability to stay productive for a much longer period of time.
Awesome. And you've run like many marathons.
Yeah, I've run over 10 marathons and a couple ultra marathons, so I'm a big fan of running. That's kind of like the core activity that I lean towards is running for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I haven't done a marathon yet. I mean, this morning I did a 5K. I love that, the way you highlight exercising, but not a marathon yet. Maybe in the future. Do you have any marathons scheduled or ultra marathons or anything like that?
Not on the calendar at this point in time. My entire life's been about business in the last couple of years, but I will be getting back to marathoning hopefully in 2016. I've got a couple marathons on my calendar that I'd like to schedule. They're kind of just like ballpark ideas at this point, but hopefully that'll be more solidified soon.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you got a book launch, right? That's pretty important. You got to focus on that.
There's a lot going on. That's true.
A lot going on. All right, so let's see. Books. What books have you read recently? Any books that have impacted you? You found helpful?
I actually just reread a book that I read last year for the first time, which is called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And it is by far one of the best books I've ever read in terms of prioritization and knowing what's most important and really having the mindset around being an essentialist, which really says that you're going to do the things that matter and you're not going to do anything else. And that's a very tough call to make. You're telling yourself no all the time to things that are really good options so that you have time for the great things that are available. And I think that's a lesson I need to relearn as much as possible because I'm so distracted by all the shiny objects, all the possibilities and the opportunities. Yeah. But you only have a certain amount of time every day to do your work, and so I have to be more selective. And I think that's a lesson I need to relearn all the time is how to make those right choices every day so that I'm getting the most return on that investment.
Okay, so what are all the? I mean, you're doing a lot already. What are all these other ideas that you have? Do you have any other projects lined up for the future? After this book launch completes?
I do. I mean, outside of public speaking, I've got webinars I want to be launching next year. I've got a big course that I'm in the process of developing very slowly over time. I've got a bunch of ideas in terms of like creating more e-commerce style stuff, like brand merchandise, and I mean the list goes on as far as projects I could be working on. So the hard part for me is choosing the most important one and ignoring the rest of them. But that's the constant battle that I'm in every day.
And hence that book you just mentioned, The Centralist?
Yeah, that's Essentialism is the name of the book. Yeah.
Essentialism. Okay. All right. So maybe we'll start winding up the interview. I have a little segment here I want to call the Twister segment. Just 3 quick, lighthearted questions. So, okay, the first one: what was your favorite cartoon growing up?
Favorite cartoon? Probably Captain Planet, which I think is it was a favorite of mine. I really liked the superhero aspect of that for sure.
Captain Planet. Okay, Captain Crunch, Wheaties, or Fruit Loops?
Fruit Loops.
Fruit Loops. I thought you would have been like a Wheaties kind of person, all your focus on nutrition and exercise.
Growing up, I don't eat cereal anymore, but growing up, Fruit Loops was definitely my favorite of those 3.
All right. Apple or banana?
Banana. For sure.
I set you up for that one, right?
That was easy. That was a softball question. Yeah.
What'd you tell our listeners about your, should I call it obsession with bananas?
You could say that. I do love bananas. Every morning for my breakfast, I tend to have, on most days, is a fruit smoothie, which the bulk of which is bananas, which is in my Vitamix blender, I can hold probably between 10 and 12 bananas in that one blender, and I will, drink that for my breakfast and have my morning nutrition. So in an average day, I might have 15 bananas. During marathon training sessions or seasons, I may have as many as 30 a day. It kind of just depends on how much energy that I think I need and how hungry I am. But bananas really are a staple in my diet for sure.
You're a banana man.
I am.
Well, that's another thing I have to thank you for. I've really kicked up my vegetable consuming thanks to you, and I have my smoothie this morning. I like spinach. I throw spinach in everything.
Nice.
Spinach
Yeah, great.
All right, cool. So let's see, just maybe 3 more questions. Do you have a free resource you can share with the audience to thank them for listening? Something that you think will help them in creating their successful business?
I do have an ebook that I share in my 5 a.m. club called 10 Miracles, which essentially breaks down my top 10 tools for productivity junkies, which essentially means that there are 10 great tools that help you be more productive. And I have found these are ones that I use every day, the ones that I love. And so if anyone joins the 5 a.m. club, that's a free resource. It's right there available.
Oh, perfect. I'll include that in the show notes. What action do you want to challenge our listeners to take as we wrap up?
I think the best challenge is to be more intentional with your time. So if you don't have to wake up at 5 a.m. tomorrow to be productive, but I think that taking the time tonight to plan tomorrow is one of the most important things you could possibly do. To do so on paper, to be very detailed when you make this plan, to be very intentional about how you spend your time, because that's what's going to lead to your own success and productivity is knowing what is most important, because you've decided that ahead of time, and then you stick to that schedule as best as you can. It's not as easy as it sounds some days, because life is challenging. There's a lot thrown at you, and there's a lot of choices to make. But the more you practice that, the easier it gets to know what matters and what doesn't. And when it's planned on paper, you can really see it and make those choices a lot faster. And so I think if any challenge for today is to just write down tomorrow's schedule, be very detailed when you do so. I think you'll see a lot of success really fast.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you very much. Good luck. Best of luck with your book launch, and stay in touch. All right, buddy?
Will do. Thanks a lot.
All right, take care. I hope you have enjoyed this interview with Jeff Sanders from the 5 a.m. Miracle podcast. You can also find him at jeffsanders.com. I highly recommend that you check out Jeff's material because, like I said, it helped me a lot, so I know it can help you. You can get the show notes for this episode in your podcast player or by going to www.creatingasuccessfulbusiness.com. There you can find articles, resources, and more. I want to invite you to join our private Facebook group. You can find the link in the contact page of the website. If you have enjoyed the show, I want to ask you to give us a rating and write a review. A 5-star rating would be greatly appreciated. This would help the podcast to be found by others. You can do this by opening the iTunes app on your computer and searching for Creating a Successful Business under Podcasts. Then click on the ratings and reviews. This is Raf Calderon signing off. And remember, in business and in life, pursue your passion and great things will happen.
Thanks for listening. You can find out more information at www.creatingasuccessfulbusiness.com. We hope you enjoyed the show. Until next time.